Hi, Adrienne, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
Hello, Anna. Thank you so much. I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. I'm so
Yeah,
happy to be here.
so excited to have you. So today we're going to dive on into your accidental free birth, unassisted birth. Wasn't meant to
hmm
be, but it happened that way. Have a home birth with midwives. So I'm really curious. When you became pregnant, did you know you wanted to have a home birth, or was that a journey for you? Or take us back to how this came about.
Yeah, perfect. So I've known for a very long time. I think it was about 7 years ago, I watched a video of a woman giving birth at home on YouTube. And I became obsessed with watching videos on YouTube of women giving birth. So I've been watching stuff like that for so long. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that that was the way I wanted to give birth because I was watching births in hospitals and there weren't any that were necessarily bad in the hospital. I just deep down knew that I wanted to have a home birth one day. And so, yeah, when I fell pregnant, it was just kind of that was what I knew that I wanted. But my husband, on the other hand, was a little bit scared about that. He only saw birth like we see it in the movies, where it's all pain and doesn't look very nice. So that was what he knew. And he was quite fearful actually about it. And I just asked him to educate himself. I sent him videos from your Instagram page, just showing him how peaceful and beautiful it actually can be. And he was quite surprised. And we did a hypnobirthing course, and that really helped him. The 6 weeks we did it for. And that really helped him to understand that birth is so normal. And, he understood what happens in our bodies and how he can best support me and how we create a space and, the breath work and the affirmations and things like that. So that really, resonated with him. He's a very intellectual kind of, thinker. So he needed it to make sense logically. And so that was really helpful. But yeah, for me, I just knew for so long. And over time, it's just, I guess with everything that's kind of, I guess, happened in the world over the last few years, I just really have wanted to go down more of a natural path. And yeah, so I found myself really looking into how to support myself the best. I had midwives, but I really wanted to make sure that I could support myself through my birth and not rely on my midwives. Because not that I was thinking in case they couldn't be there, which is funny because obviously that's ended up what happened, but just more that I didn't want to have to put my experience in someone else's hands. I didn't want to be like, the midwife is going to help me through this. I wanted to be able to do it myself. So yeah, that was kind of the journey that I went on after knowing I wanted to do it. I was like, okay, now I need to actually mentally prepare myself to go through that journey on my own and not feel like I have to kind of rely on someone else to make it feel better, if that makes sense.
I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
really clever and important. I think that's how everyone should approach their birth, whether they're birthing in the hospital, birth center, or home birth with or without
Yeah.
care providers. It really, I wish all women approached birth like that because at the end of
Me
the
too.
day, it's only you that are going to birth that baby.
hmm Yeah,
No one else
absolutely.
can do that for you, except if you kind of give yourself over to someone else's plan and they manage your birth for you. That's the two options. Either you claim it
hmm
or someone else will.
It's true. It's very true.
And
Yeah, totally.
so you did a birth course. What else did you do to prepare? What was your key things?
A lot of what it was for me was visualizing the birth that I wanted. I kind of, I got, I don't know if I started to doubt that, the fact that I could visualize the birth that I wanted, and it could be everything that I wanted it to be, because we hear so much about people saying, don't get too caught up on your birth plan because it usually never goes to plan. And so I kind of was stuck in this bit of a space for a period of time where
Yeah.
I that made sense to me to visualize the birth that I wanted, but then I was getting in my head with that also that your plan might not go to plan, and I didn't want to get to a point where I didn't have the birth that I wanted and I was suffering after my birth and then having to, heal from that. And so I was loosely visualizing, but then towards the end of my pregnancy, I just thought, you know what? It just makes so much sense for me to visualize this beautiful, pain-free birth that I wanted to have. And so, yeah, I just visualized that. It helps watching the videos as well, picturing myself in those videos was something that I did, and figuring out how I wanted things to be, and really mapping out in my house where I wanted to be doing things, the music that I wanted to be playing, which was actually quite funny. I might, share it later in the story about how that kind of came about with the whole curated playlist that I made, that, I had this expectation that I listened to this music and, my baby will come out and there'll be a song playing and that song will forever remind me of my baby coming out. Oh, I might as well just say it now, but it was actually the time that he came out, my alarm was going off because that morning I was supposed to catch up with a friend. So my alarm was going off, and my husband's an iPhone user and I'm an Android user. And so he didn't actually know how to turn off my alarm.
I know the
Um, yeah, yeah. So he was snoozing it. So every few minutes it kept going off. I was
oh,
like, turn it off, because I knew he was so close. My baby was so close. I was like, turn the alarm off. I don't want my alarm playing while I have this baby. Oh, and sure enough, my alarm was blaring because well, at the time that he came out, my husband was very occupied. He couldn't go to my phone to turn the alarm off. So that was the sound, the brr, brr, um, in the background as he came out, which was so funny. But yeah, I just did a lot of visualization, a lot of I guess reflection on, what I needed to let go of, and accepting that if my birth didn't go the way that I wanted to, that that's okay. That I needed to remind myself that I was going to get the birth that I needed, not the one that I necessarily wanted. And I guess yeah, maybe that kind of helped in the process. I'm not sure, but yeah, the breath as well. I've been doing breath work for a long time, so
mm,
really being able to tap into that and practice my breathing, even before labor. That really helped me in labor. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. That and the water in the pool were the two things that made it so beautiful. I just absolutely loved it so much.
love that. Love those takeaways. Beautiful. And
Yeah.
now every time you hear your alarm go off, you will be feeling elated that you've gone through that
Oh, I
birth
know.
process. Huh?
Right. Well, it's funny because now, I mean, I've got a baby, so he's my alarm, really. I actually haven't had to use it yet, but when I do one day, it's gonna take me back and it's gonna be beautiful.
Interesting, isn't it? Like in 5 years,
Yeah.
like waking up to the alarm and you go like, woof,
Yeah.
I wonder what's going to be imprinted on you with that sound,
Exactly.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's go back to the beginning. Do you want to share with us how you chose your birth support, so your midwives?
Yes. So I'm a bit of a look, I don't like making too many decisions. And so my really good friend, she was pregnant. She was 4 months ahead of me in her pregnancy. And she chose her midwives through a company, and I didn't even really know where to start. And so I just took her recommendation and I booked her midwife, the exact midwife she had. I was like, yep, she sounds great. I'll book her in. So I had a call with her on the phone. I think I was maybe about 5 months pregnant. I had a call with her, and yeah, we got along really well. And that was the start. We had a backup midwife as well that I met at 36 weeks. And yeah, honestly, not too much thought went into it, to be fair. I Yeah, I mean, it didn't really end up mattering in the end, did it? No, she was perfect throughout the process. She was really beautiful. Um, yeah, there was nothing that I could really. There was a couple of little things that I guess helped me to really explore that thought more around how I mentioned, really putting my birth in my hands and not expecting her to do everything for me. There was this one comment that she made about where we live, there's a clearer way. So the road that we live on at a certain time, you can't park there, otherwise you'll get towed.
Hmm.
And there was just kind of a question about the car parking, and where would they be able to park? What if it's a clear way? And there was all these questions that she was asking, and it kind of like freaked me out a little bit, because I'm like, if she's freaking out about the clear way, how is she going to help me with my birth? Because in my head, I'm like, that's such a minuscule thing. Like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that was kind of the only thing that had happened where I was like, okay, I need to do some inner work, because it kind of triggered me a little bit. So I was like, all right, this is not a her thing, this is a me thing. I need to figure out why I got so triggered by that. And that's what kind of sent me down that path of, okay, well, if my first thought is how is she going to help me through my birth if that's affecting her, that's, that was kind of a sign for me to really, yeah, to really go within and remind myself that this is a me thing, not anybody else. So
Mm.
so yeah.
And so often people get triggered and it's externalized. It's that person, it's that
Mhm.
circumstance, instead of going like, okay, I'm triggered. Sure. I mean, it could definitely be that that person did something that wasn't okay, whatever, right? But it's really, if it's a strong trigger, it really is a gift to look within and go like, okay, I think I have something here to work on, maybe an unhealed wound, whatever. Doesn't mean that you have to accept things that happen or people doing things, whatever. But it is a gift in the end. It's always about you. That you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because the thing I was thinking at the time was, oh, I need to get a new midwife,
Mm.
but it's like, what was I thinking in that situation? It's like, well, I was thinking that if I got another midwife, then she wouldn't make a comment like that. And so then the perfectionism started to kick in. I'm like, I'm looking for something perfect that doesn't exist because I don't know if I'm going to agree with every single thing my midwife says. So I'm probably not going to, but yeah, so it was a growth moment for me, that's for sure.
I love that. And I love that you turned it within and went like, how can I feel even more empowered
Mhm.
in within myself and sovereign within my own decision making and my journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Hmm.
ultimately, the midwife essentially is there in case of, right? And then
Yeah.
obviously, I think it would be beautiful if you also had this beautiful connection with your midwife and she can be also that kind of emotional, spiritual support. But
Hmm.
ultimately, like this is your journey and she's there in case you need her, not
Yeah.
because you need her. I think that's
Yeah.
a really good distinction, like in case you need her, not because you need her. Because most
Hmm.
women and babies and families will birth beautifully, right? They
Yeah.
don't need a midwife. Just in
Hmm.
case they do, those few times
Absolutely.
that yeah.
Yeah. And just the aftercare, the aftercare that I received from my midwives was so beautiful. That was honestly one of the most beautiful things, obviously, aside from having this beautiful baby sitting on my chest and, having that gorgeous skin to skin after he was born, was just the care that they provided. The backup midwife, she was more of that, kind of like spiritual, warm, um, just yeah, really warm presence that you need once you've, just given birth. And my maid midwife, she was kind of the rock, she was just kind of there, she's steady, she was, the facts and kind of just made the ship run. And then the backup midwife was just kind of there to yeah, kind of to create this love and this bubble. It was really, really awesome. And even my husband was like, wow, that was amazing. Like just they stayed there for hours with us and yeah, it was beautiful. It made me a placenta smoothie.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's dive into the birth, shall we? I would love to hear. Did you have any early signs of labor approaching for you?
Um, looking back, I think I had very subtle signs. So a few days leading up to giving birth, I had a conversation with him and I said, I'm happy because I ended up giving birth at 39 weeks and 6 days. And I had an event that weekend. So he was born on the Saturday. I had an event from the Friday to the Sunday. And it was just going to be at, the convention center here in Melbourne, lots of sitting down, the personal development conference. And I was really excited for it, but also was very excited if he was to arrive that weekend as well. But I had this conversation with him and I said, look, if you're ready to come, I'm ready for you. If you want to just hang out, because my due date was the day after, obviously. I said, if you want to hang out in there for a little bit longer so that I can go to this conference, then that would be amazing. If not, that's amazing as well. Like, I can't wait to meet you. And so I don't know, I think I had a feeling he was coming that weekend. Not for anything physical. I think I was actually quite relaxed that whole week. And maybe that was kind of a sign that I was really getting prepared. But the night before, my husband and I were at an event with some friends, and I was standing up a lot. And I got to a point where I was like, I need to like squat. I need to like get down like really low because sitting and standing was just not comfortable anymore. And so I sat in that squat for about 10 minutes. And that was around about 8 p.m. the night before I went into labor. I started contractions at midnight. So at about 8 p.m. was when I was in that really deep squat. So I think that, considering I had a 7.5 hour labor, that potentially, helped him drop down a little bit. But yeah, I didn't honestly, physically, I was quite tired, but my waters didn't break. I didn't have any, I was having Braxton Hicks for months. So that wasn't really anything different. They were ramping up. I was getting them a lot more frequently. So, that probably was a sign as well. But I didn't realize that when we got home from that event at about 11:45 at night, that 15 minutes later, when I climbed into bed, my first contraction would come. So yeah, kind of some signs, but not anything where I was like, this baby is definitely coming. It was just very subtle. Now upon reflection, I'm like, okay, that was pretty obvious that things were starting to happen.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for anyone listening who hasn't had a baby, what was the difference between all those Braxton Hicks compared to that first contraction? How did you know it was a contraction compared to Braxton?
So Braxton Hicks was always just it was kind of like, when a baby, okay, well, obviously for people who haven't had a baby, you're not going to know this. When your baby moves, they move in you, and it's kind of like this, feels like this like pushing sensation, obviously, that they're like pushing, and your skin's kind of like stretching almost. It's kind of a weird way to explain it, but the Braxton Hicks was more of like a tightening. So when I would look at my belly, it would look like he was moving, but that actually wasn't him moving. It was just I guess my uterus just kind of contracting. So it felt more of like a stretching, and the contraction actually felt like a period cramp. That's the best way I can describe it, really, is that, yeah, the Braxton Hicks is more of a stretch, kind of tightening, and then more the cramping sensation of a period was the contraction. And I just knew that was it, because after it happened for the first time, I kind of was like, oh, I didn't know 100% if it was it, but I had a feeling, and I kind of just waited, and it came again and then went. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, I think this is something. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that I was going to be having him 7 hours later, 7 and a bit hours later. But yeah, that was the first moment. And for a couple of hours, I was just in bed, laying down, and I was just kind of, breathing through them, falling asleep in between. And then at about 2:30, so 2.5 hours in, I was starting to have to be audible, starting to groan, groan through them. I was like, oh, okay, I need to actually make sound to move through these. Still very relaxed. It was actually quite beautiful. But I needed to get up then. I needed to not be laying down. So yeah, I got up and moved outside and did a bit of visualizations, and had a guided meditation going on my computer out in the lounge room. And yeah, we're just kind of moving around in different positions. I found that just sitting down on the couch, like my bum on the edge of the couch with my legs wide open, I'm kind of leaning on my knees. That was really, really good. That was such an awesome position. Everything else was just, I was moving through contractions, standing up on the ball, laying down, and that was just too much. So in that position, it was beautiful. I felt like I had so much control, and it didn't actually hurt. It was just intense, it was just a bit of an intense feeling, but it only lasted for a minute. So, it was not bad at all for me. Um, which people are a bit angry at me when I say that. Like, how did it not hurt?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Everyone will have such a different experience. We're also built so
Yeah.
differently, and nerve endings, everything, how the
Mm-hmm.
baby's flying, just so many
It's
different
true.
things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really.
And I was lucky. He was very in the perfect position. And he was there for quite a while. So yeah, I'm sure that definitely helped. It's interesting. It's so crazy. It's stuff like that I didn't know. And I guess you don't know, right? Until you have a baby and you learn about all the different things, that there's so much to it. And there's a reason why we all have different experiences, is because there's so many different variations of normal
Yeah,
that happen. Yeah.
absolutely. So
Mm.
it's starting to ramp up. Was it regular from the get-go when it started that you felt like there was a rhythm?
Um, yeah, there was definitely a rhythm. I wasn't timing them, but I felt like there was a quite a consistent rhythm. And at about 4 a.m., I started timing them. I just wanted to get a gauge of where I was at because my husband was still asleep. I knew he was going to be waking up for work soon. So I just kind of let him sleep as long as possible. Um, yeah, I knew he wasn't going to be going to work, obviously, but I thought I'll just let him sleep until his alarm goes off. But I ended up timing them for that, yeah, between 4 and 4:30, and they were 4.5 minutes apart and a minute long.
Mm.
So I kind of thought, well, that seems close together.
Mm.
Just the fact that I hadn't given birth before. That seems like they're close together. But also, I just wanted to be in the water. I wanted to be in the pool. So I woke my husband up at 4:30 and asked him to start to fill up the pool. And then he called the midwife as well. And she was just kind of, asking the questions, how far apart are her contractions? How is she doing? And she, I guess, was listening to me move through the contractions as well. Whilst she was on the phone with my husband, and yeah, she was kind of like, well, look, everything seems like it's progressing. And in my mind, I wanted her to come because I had a feeling that things were happening like really quickly, but I just couldn't it was almost like I couldn't verbalize it. And I was also like, well, she's a professional. If she's, based on how I sound, if she thinks that it's not time for me to come yet, then for her to come yet, then maybe I'm not as close as we think, or I'll just keep doing my thing. And I'm sure that she'll come when the time is right. So yeah, that kind of was a little bit of a thing there where I knew I wanted her, but I just, in that state, couldn't verbalize for some reason, I want you to come now. So yeah, they were definitely ramping up, but not not too intense. When I got into the pool, I really, really relaxed a lot more. I was already relaxed, but the water just, oh my gosh, it was the most beautiful feeling. I just remember just for a few minutes, just I couldn't shut up about how amazing it was. I was like, oh, this is so good. Um, and so anyway, from there, I had a beautiful wall set up in front of the pool, which had my affirmations and just a photo of a flower blossoming open. It was from our hypnobirthing course, and they said to visualize your cervix opening like this, this flower. And so as I was sitting in the pool, I was just just visualizing my cervix opening and opening and opening, and that definitely helped because my body just started pushing. As soon as I got in the pool, my body just, and I was stopping it from pushing. I don't know, it's such a hard sensation to describe, but every time I would have a contraction, it was like the ejection, the what do they call that? The fetal ejection reflex. Is that what it's called?
Mm. It's
Yeah.
involuntary. It's just what's happening
Yeah.
when the baby gets.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. Your body just takes over. Yeah.
Yep. So I felt down there to see if, because I was like, I'm pretty sure he's there. So I felt down there, but I couldn't feel a head. I couldn't really feel anything different. So I was like, okay. And again, in my mind, I was stopping that feeling. I was stopping that sensation because the midwife wasn't there. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be pushing, even though, that's my body was pushing. So of course it was supposed to be happening. Um, but yeah, I was really gaslighting myself through that process, because I knew what was happening. I knew physically, my body knew, but my mind was just, getting in the way a little bit. And up till that point, only for a couple of minutes, because I just gave into it. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna continue doing what I'm doing, not think, oh, I'm stopping it, and not getting in my head. I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. And I then said to my husband, you need to call her and she needs to come. That was the point where I was like, okay, something is happening. And this was about, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour before he was born. And so I was trying different positions in the pool, but every position I got into that wasn't just on my back, I felt like he was just going to come out. And yeah, for whatever reason, I just didn't think that he should be coming out, or I didn't think he was coming out. So I just kind of stayed where I was. And then my husband was offering me, food and water. And I was not having any of it. I'd bit on a little bliss ball this is another thing. I prepped all these little snacks for labor and I didn't even eat anything. Because I was just so far past even wanting that, and that's the other thing. I think I was waiting for that transition that people talk about, that point where it's like you're saying you can't do it. It's not, you want the drugs, you want the everything. I just didn't experience that. And so I think that's why I thought it was still early days in my labor. But my husband said, because I said, I need to poo. I think I need to poo. And he said, all right, well, let's. And I knew as well that that meant baby is like there. But for some reason, I was just like, oh, maybe not. Maybe he's not there. Maybe I do just need to poo. And for whatever reason, I didn't want to poo in the pool. I thought, let's go to the toilet, not thinking I could have my baby in the toilet. So he was like, okay, well, let's just go to the toilet, mix up the environment a bit. And I thought, okay, maybe that will slow things down a bit, wait for the midwife to get here. So I walked from the pool to the toilet. I sat on the toilet and had a contraction almost instantly. My waters broke. I put my hand down and I felt his head. I was like, oh my gosh, I can feel his head. I was like, he's coming. And my husband's like, oh my gosh, do you want to go back to the pool? And I was like, there's no way we're going to make it back to the pool. We need to prepare to do this right here. But I said, I'm not having this baby in the toilet. So we need to hustle and get me off this toilet. So I just kind of waited a minute until the contraction passed, and it was in that in between phase. There wasn't much time in between my contractions at this point, so it was very quick. From when I sat down on the toilet to when he was born, it was about 4 minutes.
Mm.
So it was so fast. His head came out. I was kind of standing. I was standing up, but I was kind of like leaning forward a little bit, and his head came out. And so Mitch had one hand calling the midwife, and the other hand, I was like, catch him. I thought he was just gonna like fall out. So I just said to Mitch, I'm like, put your hand, like catch him or something. And so, he was behind me so he could, see what was going on. And he just put his hand on our baby's head. And, obviously the way that he was born, his face was just there. And Mitch was just like looking at his son's face. And oh my gosh, I love his telling of the story as well. Cause it's just, if you know my husband, he needs to be prepared. He doesn't like surprises. He doesn't like not knowing things. And so the fact that he kept his cool and he was so composed in this moment was just so incredible. But he just, yeah, that was a highlight for him, was just looking down and, his baby's in between worlds, and Mitch's hand is on his head. And it was just, yeah, it was so beautiful for him. And so, yeah, pretty much I said to him, look, I need to get on my hands and knees. I have to be on the floor. And so, yeah, I kind of just moved my way down to my hands and knees, and the next contraction came pretty much straight away. And I kind of gave a bit of a push at this point. I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, like this is really intense and I need to just like get this baby out. Which which is kind of funny now that I think about it, because, the stark difference between how I was in the pool. I was just like so relaxed. I was like, because sometimes it felt like I wasn't even in labor, to then being on the toilet and being in the bathroom. I was like, oh my gosh, like things are happening so quickly and we're not stopping this. So yeah, I got down on my hands and knees, and my body, again, just pushed, and I gave a little bit of extra push, and I felt his shoulder come out. And yeah, that was the only thing I remember in terms of the sensation, of the feeling of him coming out. I don't remember his head coming out. I don't remember, yeah, anything like that. I just remember the shoulders coming out. And yeah, my husband caught him, and I was like, did you catch him? Did you catch him? Did you drop him? Oh my gosh. And so, yeah, he just kind of passed him through. And my umbilical cord was quite short. It was about this long.
Oh
And
my.
so, yeah, I kind of went to pick him up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that. Okay. He's not going any further. So I just kind of sat down on the bathroom mat and had him just, kind of resting on my belly. He was high enough to be able to reach my breast. So he kind of latched on quite quickly. But yeah, we just kind of sat there, and my husband and I were just looking at each other like, oh my gosh. And so when he called the midwife, she actually didn't answer. It went to voicemail because she was on the phone to the backup midwife to kind of share that, we're on our way. We've got to, go to Adrienne and Mitch's house. And then from that moment, she didn't even get a chance to call Mitch back. Mitch called her again once baby was here. And she's like, hey, how you going? And he's like, yeah, good. The baby's here. And she's like, oh my gosh, what? Because I guess in her mind, first births,
Yeah.
chances are it's going to be a long labor. and she, in her mind, 4.5 minutes apart wasn't close enough for a first time mum, typically. So yeah, she was still half an hour away as well from when he was born. So we just sat in the bathroom. The midwife did say to call the ambulance and just have them sit there and wait with us, just in case. And so we did that, and that was even a funny story in itself. The ambulance, the two paramedics, they had never seen a birth, never been to a birth before, and so when they saw the job come through that it was a home birth, they were like, oh my gosh, we need to go to this. And so they rocked up, but it was so funny. They actually didn't even know what to do. She's like, oh, did you not make it to the hospital in time? And I said, no, I wasn't going to the hospital. I had a planned home birth. The midwife just didn't make it in time. And they were like, oh, oh my gosh. Like they were just so shocked. I could just tell they just didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. And they were like, okay, well, what hospital were you going to? I thought that's what they said first. They said, what hospital were you supposed to be going to? And I said, oh, I wasn't going to hospital, but I said I was registered at, so and so hospital, just in case we needed to go there. And so she's like, okay, cool, I'll get the bed ready and we'll put you on a gurney and we'll take you to the hospital. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, we don't need to go to the hospital. Everything's fine. But I mean, bless her, like they only go to those things, in an emergency.
Yeah.
That's what they would do. They would go, they would take them away. And because it wasn't an emergency, they were like, okay, we have no idea what we're supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah.
And so we just sat there and we just chatted. And I just said, I was just asking them questions, and they were asking us questions, and they were just so, yeah, obviously so shocked and at the whole thing. But she said to me at one point, she said, oh, do you want to come out of the bathroom? Because our bathroom was quite cold compared to the rest of the house. And she said, can you stand up? And I was like, I don't think so. Like getting up from the ground seems really hard right now. So like, no. And she's like, and I said, oh, and my umbilical cord is still attached and it's quite short. Like I don't really feel comfortable getting up. And she's like, oh, we can just cut the cord. I'm like, no, 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 no. Not cutting the cord. We are delaying the cord cutting, please. But even that, she was kind of like, what do you mean? Like, why not cut the cord? And then I said, oh, kind of talk to her about what happens when you leave the cord until it stops pulsating and things like that. And they were just kind of like, oh my gosh, we are so green. Like we don't know anything. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, but they were lovely. We just chatted, and obviously there was nothing wrong. The midwives arrived and they left, and I got into bed and we had our beautiful golden hour, and I birthed the placenta in the bed, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. There was a little bit of a moment there where obviously there was a bit of shock. I was like, what just happened? But it was also just the best feeling. It was so empowering just to feel I guess, yeah, just the magnitude of what we'd just done together, having that experience, especially with how my husband was. Because in the beginning, he wanted to be in the hospital. So to go from that to then when I asked him if he wanted to be in the pool with me, with the midwives for our home birth, do you want to be in the pool with me? Do you want to like catch the baby? He's like, no, it's okay. Like the midwives, they're professionals, they can do it. To then him actually birthing our baby by ourselves was, yeah, just such a cool progression and so much growth for him for sure. I guess I kind of knew that I could do it, I think, more than anything. But for him, yeah, it was really cool. So it really brought us a lot closer together, and it's a cool story. So
Yeah, a really cool story. And also, I'm really happy to hear that the paramedics were kind of, humble in their way of approaching your home birth and more so like, oh, like receiving the information and just observing and learning from you. And what a great experience
yeah.
for them to have as well as their first home birth experience, that it was such a calm, I mean, it wasn't an emergency at all. And
Mm-hmm.
um how beautiful for them too to have that. I wish that
Yeah.
paramedics would have that experience. I mean, all people who ever come in contact with birthing women and
Mm-hmm.
home births should have a
Yeah.
good experience of a home birth before they don't, so that they don't have these prejudice around having.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I guess our experience was quite unique in the sense that, when the paramedics are called, I guess they're only ever called to a home birth when there is an emergency, right? And so when there's not an emergency, they're not called typically. But because the midwives weren't there, that was the only reason they got called. And so, yeah, it was just, I'm very much in agreement. I'm really glad that they got to witness that you can have home births and everything be fine, even without, even without having professionals there to kind of help, because yeah, there is just a stigma around birth. It's really sad, but I think it's changing, isn't it? I think it's people are starting to really open their eyes up and see that it can be really safe to birth at home.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's changing, which is beautiful, finally.
Mhm.
And I have to ask, who and when did the alarm turn off?
Once he was born and my husband got off the phone with the midwife, it was still going. And I just said to him, I'm like, can you turn that thing off? Like, and he was like, yes, okay, I'm annoyed by it too, don't worry. So yeah, it was a couple of minutes after he came out that that alarm stopped sounding. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I was like, wow, what a moment to humble me, out of the I just was so set on this playlist, and that was something
Yeah.
that I, visualized. I'm like, oh yes, spent so much time. My whole pregnancy, I was adding songs to this playlist, and I got through about 5 songs, I think. Um, and then the alarm started sounding, and he was here. So
I love that. That is a funny, quirky thing about your story. That is so lovely
yeah,
too, though. Ah,
yes.
so if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to
Mm.
have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
Um, oh gosh, I would really encourage. So just with my story, with my husband at the beginning being a little bit apprehensive about a home birth, something that I notice with people that I know, or just, hearing different people's stories, is that women want a home birth, but their partner isn't okay with it, or they're not comfortable or confident in it. And so they don't end up having a home birth because of that. And I am a massive believer that both, both parties need to be on the same page. It really makes me sad though that when a woman doesn't get a home birth and, the same page, which doesn't actually end up being the same page if a woman wants a home birth and doesn't end up having one, right? But that we fall back to, well, we'll just go into the hospital then. And so my advice would be for men, for women, I suppose, but for men, is to just educate yourself on what birth can be like at home. Go to the hypnobirthing courses, go to, you know, videos, and watch people having babies in beautiful, calm environments, because that changed my husband's perspective. I think as well because I was so set on it. I didn't let him convince me that we weren't having a home birth. I was very much like, no, no, we're having a home birth. You need to get on the same page.
Yeah.
And he was so receptive to that. He's such an incredible man. Like he'll do anything I ask him to, pretty much. We just have that relationship, and he just thought, okay, all right, this is your thing. You're going to be doing this, and so I need to come to the table. And yeah, hypnobirthing just really opened his eyes up, and he was able to, yeah, logic the situation. Um, because yeah, I think there's too many women not getting the birth that they want, even in an environment that they choose, let alone, not being able to choose the environment that they want. And so yeah, that was, I guess, a big thing that I've been noticing lately as well, with women who have, are even sharing um, my story with people they know, and it kind of coming back to me to say like, oh yeah, she really wants a home birth, but her partner's really not on board. And it's, my story, even just with the few people that I've shared it with as well, have said that it's actually encouraged and inspired them to even want to have a baby, because they didn't want to have a baby before, but also have a home birth. And so yeah, I think if I hadn't have been set in my decision and what I wanted, and my husband didn't come to the table, it would have been a completely different story, right? And maybe one that I didn't want or didn't like. So yeah, I think it's really important to be on the same page, but for the man to really come to the table, and if he has fear, to really remove it, because and I don't know if you can fully remove it. There was a little bit of, fear for me even when I was sitting on the toilet and I'm like, oh my gosh, whoa. So, but it's just reframing it as well, reframing that story, and it not being that something bad is going to happen, and reframing the story that it's going to be amazing no matter what happens. So yeah, that would be the first thing. Another thing that I guess I lightly touched on earlier is trusting your body. When I was in my head was when things were harder for me in my labor. When I was fully tuned into my body and, breathing and that kind of thing, that was where I really had the most ease through my labor. For sure, trusting the body. Body knows what it's doing. Our mind will play tricks on us all the time in every situation. So yeah, my body was a massive, yeah, focus for me, was really staying in my body for as much as I could and noticing when I wasn't in it, as well. So, and I guess, years of meditation and breath work has helped with that. And the last thing that was really prevalent in my journey as well was reframing pain. So I was kind of, because I wouldn't say I have a high pain threshold normally, or I've just never really been through, I've never had surgery. I've not ever had stitches. Like I had a little bit of a tear from birth. And that's the first time I've ever had stitches. I'm 30 years old. I've never had a stitch, never been to the hospital for a broken limb or anything like that. And so I was like, I've not really been through something that painful. And people say, childbirth is the most painful thing you'll ever experience. So I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to cope with the pain? And I had a chat with my husband and we were just kind of talking through it. And something that I read in a book called Birth with Confidence, which I would recommend to anybody who's pregnant, is she was talking about the fact that, reframing pain, but also moving through it and understanding that we have to not try to remove it. It's actually embracing that sensation. That really helped me because I thought, okay, it's not that I'm trying to remove the pain, it's just that I'm moving through it.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful as well. And I think just, that whole the mindset of this is actually, my baby's coming. I get to have a baby at the end of this. It's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and kind of at the end of it, once I had him and I was kind of reflecting on it, I thought, wow, that I have been through more painful things physically before, just not anything that you would think is, that I could kind of relate. I was thinking pain is blood and surgery and, that kind of thing. But I've had physical pain in my body before as a manifestation of internal emotional stuff that I hadn't actually dealt with. It kind of came out in physical pain for me. And for about a year, I suffered really bad with inflammation in my body. And I was just sore all the time. And that for me was so painful. And so to think that, yeah, I kind of went through that experience and could look back on it to say, wow, I actually did reframe pain in those moments throughout my labor.
Yeah.
I think that really helped to enjoy the process a little bit more. So yeah, lots of internal work that needs to be done with this. It's a lot more internal than it is physical, in my experience. So I really focused on, just getting my mind right and my spirit right, and everything else followed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your beautiful birth story and all your birth wisdom.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful for your work and everything you're doing. It's one of the real the one of the bigger things of my journey, your videos and things like that really helped me to get into the right mindset and to really trust that I could do this. So thank you for the stuff that you share and the work that you do. It's really changing the world. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Adrienne.
That's okay.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.